Hey everyone, welcome back to the studio. This week we're going to talk about a progression called the Backdoor 2-5. This harmonic move pops up in tons of standards and can seem kind of weird when you first encounter it. Today I'm going to demystify this progression for you by teaching you about where it comes from, how it connects to the major key, and how to play over it. We'll start out by doing some analysis of the progression itself, and then I'll show you guys some patterns that I think work really well over this move. You guys ready? Let's get into it. In order to play effectively over any progression, I think it's really important to understand how it functions. In the case of the backdoor, what we really need to know is that it's just a clever substitution for a normal 2-5 in the parent major key. To help in unpacking how that works, let's take a quick detour to a concept that commonly gets called the dominant diminished family. If I was to play a C7 flat 9 and then play the diminished 7 a half step higher, I'm pretty confident in assuming that most of you guys already know that those two chords are just inversions of one another. Then, if I take the diminished chord up to its next inversion by going up a minor third from there, I get this, right? Well, what happens if I then lower that diminished down to a dominant flat 9 voicing? You'd think this is just an E flat 7 flat 9 chord, wouldn't you? And yeah, you'd be right, but it also functions as a substitution for C7 because of how they're related by the diminished chords. I can then repeat this by going up the remaining inversions of the diminished, and I get this sound. Another way to think about the dominant diminished family is that we get altered dominant chords that go up in minor thirds. And between those, on the chord tones of whatever we're considering the parent chord, in this case that's C7, we get diminished chords starting off the flat ninth, and those go up in minor thirds as well. We can explore that sound in more depth by learning the half-whole diminished scale. Let me know if you guys want me to cover that sound here in the future. Now, here's how all of that ties into the backdoor 2-5. If C is my dominant, then I know I'm going home to F major, right? Well, now that we know about dominant diminished, we can substitute any dominant chord going up in minor thirds from C. So instead of C7, I could decide to play E flat 7 sharp 9, which is the flat 7th of the F. Now that's the back door. What about the 2 chord though? The simplest way to justify that is by just thinking of it as the related minor to our new backdoor dominant. Since we decided to use E flat 7 in the place of C7, it then follows that B flat minor 7 would precede it, because that's the 2 chord to our new dominant. Up next, I prepared a couple examples for you guys of ways that I might voice out this change in the key of C. Play around with some of these moves and see how I connected what seems like a pretty outside chord change with some smooth voice leading. Now that we've got a handle on the chord progression, let's take a look at a few patterns that you can use to work on playing lines over it. But before we do that, I've got a super special announcement. I'm so excited to tell you guys that I've partnered with Truefire.com. I've been working on some courses for them for the past few months, and you should definitely look forward to those. They should be released mid-next year, and of course I'll update you all when I have a firm release date. In the meantime, they're running an absolutely killer sale over on their site that you should definitely go check out. Truefire has literally thousands of courses by incredible artists and educators, and I'm super excited to be joining that number myself. If you've ever been curious about checking out a Truefire course and you really like my content, now's a great time to jump in to learn, practice, and play with Truefire. The link for that is down in the description of this video. Now, let's get on to some patterns I've cooked up for you guys over the backdoor progression. Just like in the last video, I'll play each one up to tempo so you can hear what they sound like. Then, I'll break down the pattern and do a harmonic analysis so you can get a better understanding of how they work. Let's check out the first pattern now. For this first pattern, I wanted to keep things a little simple. I started out by playing this little 1, 2, 3, 5 cell in F minor that pivots to the root of B flat 7 on beat 3. Remember, I don't really care much about sticking inside the 2 chord the whole time, so resolving to a chord tone of the dominant early is no problem for me. Then I ran up to the 3rd with 2 half steps and followed that up by playing up the diminished triad. Then I just came back down the scale to the 3rd. To keep it from sounding boring, I used a triplet on beat 3 and added 1 extra half step to make the run a little more interesting. I wanted to resolve down into the 3rd of C by a half step like I normally would, so I went back up to the 5th of B flat and then resolved. Once I got to the C chord, I wanted to continue the phrase a little longer, so I played this displaced arpeggio off the 3rd, and then played this bird-inspired turn to get me back down the scale into the 3rd in a lower octave. Take one more look at that pattern a little slower now. Check out this next pattern up to tempo first. Pattern 2 started out with one of my favorite little devices, a displaced arpeggio off the 3rd of the chord. That resolves down into the root of the F minor, but I wanted to get down to the 3rd of B flat on the downbeat of the next bar. Since there aren't enough notes between here and there, I had to use some Barry Harris chromaticism to get 2 half steps so I could get where I wanted to go. Remember, this F on the end of 4 is really functioning as a half step to put rhythmic space between this E flat and the D that comes next. Once I got to the 3rd of B flat, I went up the diminished chord and resolved it down on the end of 2. Then I played this little pentatonic sounding cell to pull up into the 5th of C. I wanted to keep that sound, so I decided to play down this A minor 7 arpeggio, then jumped up by a 4th and played down this E minor 7 arpeggio, before jumping up a 4th again to resolve into the 7th of C by a whole step. Here's pattern 2 one more time under tempo. Let's go through one more pattern today up to tempo first. For this final pattern, I started out with another displaced arpeggio. Well, this time I did it off the flat 7th of F though. That pivots down to the 5th of the F, and so I decided to get down to the flat 7th of B flat with 2 half steps. From there, I came down the diminished chord, but I wanted this B natural to land on a downbeat, so I interrupted the arpeggio with this C note. That sort of acts as a chromatic approach and let me land on the beat the way that I wanted to. Off the flat 9th of B flat, I played this enclosure cell to get me to the 5th of the C on the downbeat of the next bar. From there, I played this cell to get me to the 7th of C on beat 3. It's kind of a callback to the previous phrase, and I think doing stuff like that really gives your lines a sense of cohesion. Off the 7th of C, I played this digital pattern, which is a permutation of the 1, 2, 3, 5 idea in G. This one is spelled 3, 1, 2, 5 in G. Playing one of those patterns off the 5th of this chord gave me the sound of C major 13, kind of like how playing a G6 chord over a C bass gives you the sound of C major 9. That pattern then resolved down a 3rd into the 7th of C to end the phrase. Here's that last pattern, just a little slower now. for watching all the way to the end of the video. I really hope I've been able to give you guys a better understanding of how to play over the backdoor progression. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of today's lesson. Do you guys prefer these kinds of pattern-oriented videos, or is there maybe another style of content that you'd like to see me revisit? Get in touch. I'm always open to suggestions from the community. You guys are why I'm doing this after all. While you're at it, make sure to like this video if you found it helpful, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications. I've got big stuff in the works for you guys for 2024, so make sure you stay tuned. As always, if you want to support the channel even further, you can head on over to my Patreon page, where as little as $10 a month can get you access to all the PDF content from every video on the channel, plus bonus videos for patrons only. A special thanks goes out to my incredible patrons: PH, Josh, David Zuckerbraun, Max Irwin, Everton Armstrong, Jay Jarek, Bill Jacob, Steven Schwartz, Anderson Cachias, Jay Montana, and Jim. A super special thank you goes out to Jazz Luminaire patron Bebop Babadi. Thank you to all of you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.